I am the founder of Hope Storm, which is a coaching, consulting, and hypnotherapy business based out of Spearfish. Um, I have a This is mostly all on the screen, so I'm not going to go over a ton of it, but I have a doctoral degree in psychology, 15 years experience in the nonprofit world. I started my business 6 years ago, and ultimately I do everything stress and trauma. And so all of my past experience, all of my educational experience, all of that is wrapped up in trauma. And so I'm going to hopefully give that some to some of you tonight.
Thank you, Anna. And she has lived experience with her own early childhood child in her house still, so she's gonna have some fun stories, I think, for us too in regard to that. All right, over to our in-house expert, Carole.
I think I have met a lot of you along the way. I've been at ECC for almost 8 years. I grew up in Selby, South Dakota, and I have a master's in counseling and human resource development. I worked as a therapist for quite a few years. It's a high burnout profession, and I did not take care of myself while I was a therapist and I burned out. So then I did a variety of different things and landed my job here at ECC, like I said, about 8 years ago. And it really has been an amazing journey working in the field of early childhood education. And it's the toughest job I've ever had and the most rewarding job I've ever had. So, and I have two daughters and they're grown and off on their own lives. And I have a very busy dog, 2-year-old dog. She's almost 3 that I live with.
Many of you have probably gotten to benefit from Carole's expertise when she comes in to help in your classrooms. So you'll be familiar with some of the Carole lingo, I think, that'll be present tonight.
Carol speak.
Yes, Carolese.
Carolese. Uh,
So to start off with, when Anna and Carole and I had met a couple times before this and had some really amazing conversations, I always ask for, what's a good quote that kind of summarizes this? And Anna, you can tell, is a wealth of knowledge because she sent me like 10 to choose from. And so it was really hard to narrow it down. However, this one I thought you guys would all be able to align with because we actively see these adaptive responses every day. There is no such thing as a bad response. There are only adaptive responses. So that is what you guys are in. You're in the thick of it. And I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to reflect with us tonight because we know the work you do is so hard, but it is, Carole just said, it is also so rewarding. So the topic tonight, it's all foundational and transformative, and trauma-informed care is early childhood. It is you being aware of not just behavior management and crisis-informed care, but how this interweaves with the whole physical development of the child, which Anna is going to touch on, and it's going to be so enlightening. It ties in safety, connection, belonging, all the things that Carole preaches every time she comes into the classroom. And trauma-informed care isn't an extra. It's a condition for equity for all of these children in our care. It's the way we respond to children's emotions, how we build those relationships, and how we create this predictable, loving, and nurturing environment that they feel safe. And when they feel safe, they're ready to engage. They're ready to learn and join and make those peer connections. So this work is hard, as you all know, and trauma-informed care is also very hard. It's nuanced, but it's deeply human. Many of you are doing this work already. You guys are doing these things. You are that calm voice when they're having that challenging behavior. You're that proximity to them when they need that gentle touch. So you're already doing some of these things. We're going to apply a little bit of name and knowledge to the importance of what you guys are doing. So this session matters, this topic matters. Again, thank you for joining, and I really hope you guys all walk away with some great tools and maybe a refreshed lens on why this is the important work. Okay, before we dive into some topic matter, hold on one second. I got a couple people in the waiting room. Okay. Um, as we were having our beginning conversations, it came up that ACEs is a very common term and it gets thrown around a lot. However, do we actually know what it means? What does it look like? And so we thought we would allow you guys for just a minute or two to kind of absorb and maybe get some reminders of what trauma can actually consist of. And it's not just the huge things that normally come to mind. It can be just, a divorce in the family. It can be that emotional neglect that we see sometimes in families. So we wanted to leave this up here for just a second or two and let you guys absorb. Carole or Anna, did you have anything to add on to this before I navigate on?
Good.
I just thought it was that it's good to kind of look at this and look at how diverse different environments and situations can be that contribute to trauma and um, and that it adds up. It's not like there's a situation and it's isolated like the divorce, but like if there's a divorce and somebody's in jail and perhaps there's been some domestic violence, that those things build up. The intensity of trauma then becomes impacted. And so that's something more to keep in mind.
Mhm. Absolutely. And also this graphic with the roots and thinking about these community environments too that are affecting some of the children within your care. So, okay.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
A lot of these little kids have older siblings that are getting arrested for drugs and alcohol and things like that. That's also traumatizing to them. I know when one of my older children was acting out, Brody was really affected by it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's,
So
yep.
it's not just mom and dad.
Hmm.
That's a really good point.
That whole
It's
household.
really it's really every level. I mean, it's your community, it's your school, it's your home, it's your extended family, the people that you're around. All of those levels can impact you in this way.
And then when you think about that, it is all those levels, as Anna said. Now we're going to let Carole quickly talk about the prevalence. How often?
As you can see the statistics there, it's just nice to keep this in mind as you're dealing with the kids in your classroom and just reflect on the statistics of it. So about a third, a little more than a third of children um, don't have any ACEs. They've been fortunate enough, I think, to to not have to deal with that. And then one ACE, about 26% of the population, and then two ACEs of 16%, and three ACEs, 9%, and 12% for four more ACEs. So it, like I said, the impact of that multiplies, the severity of how those ACEs impact you as an adult, well, as a kid growing up and then into your adult life, becomes more severe.
And if you've not seen the ACEs survey, it's a super quick Google search. It's everywhere, it's free. And so you can see kind of what they use as categories to determine these numbers.
Yes, that's a great idea. We didn't think it would be very beneficial to have you guys fill that out because we don't want to open up a can of worms if you're unfamiliar with what your ACEs level is. So, however, Carole had a good segue about what does that look like then as an adult or an adolescent, and we're going to let Anna quickly walk us through what that can indicate or
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah. So ultimately, the more trauma and stress we experience as little people, that all gets wired into our nervous systems and it all impacts us as we get older. So it affects our physical health, our mental health, it affects our social outcomes. And so you can see on this slide just some of the things that people who have had higher ACE scores can be impacted by, their mental health and um, their sexual behaviors and those types of things. So um, definitely leads to more negative outcomes, the more ACE scores somebody has. Not guaranteed. I mean, there's, it's not a standard, but it gives a pretty good picture.
Yeah, that is good to note. It's not a sentence, right? We're not living by that. So, and then something quickly to note, tonight is about the children and the trauma. However, this graphic I want to touch on for the leaders that are here tonight. If you're an admin, also think about this with your staff too. What are the ACEs and the trauma that these people are experiencing? And keep that in your mind too when you're having to have those hard conversations or if they continue to miss work. So don't be afraid in some of these slides to flip it and think about your own staff through that lens as we go through this. Okay, here's a quick little graphic that Carole had used when she was a therapist. So I thought we would do a quick check-in. Are you aware of how you're feeling right now? So after that heavy talk about ACEs, if you want to do the emoji or drop it in the chat, how are you feeling right now? And we won't take the time to navigate over all of them, but just reflect in a little check-in. While you guys are dropping those in the chat, I'm going to leave this up for maybe another 30 seconds because there are some pretty funny emoji faces on here.
Yeah, this usually gets a couple of giggles or a couple of laughs um, when people look at them. In the bottom row is turned on.
I saw
You don't
that.
you don't see that very often. on, on
Very
a
mischievous.
Mhm. Loaded.
and loaded, and then there's another one kind of in the middle, one of the middle rows hung over.
So definitely an adult resource to share with your teacher.
Yeah, yeah. When I give this out in trainings, I always say, don't hang this one up in your classroom.
Yeah. Uh, and I love seeing all of the optimistic and positivity in the chat. That's great.
Yeah.
It's almost the end of the school year, so good job hanging in there, ladies. Okay, we're going to move on. So now we're going to dive into the meat of it. So what are the areas of importance for trauma-informed care in early childhood? We're going to allow Anna and Carole to have a really great conversation back and forth about some things they've identified, some tools and resources. And again, if you guys have questions, thoughts, drop them in the chat or feel free to hop off of mute. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Thanks. So the first foundation that we're talking about tonight is safety. And really that's every foundation that we're going to cover is highly important. But safety is really what our nervous systems seek to determine if something is good or bad. If something's, we're okay, we're not okay. So it's really an important one because safety is a very personal thing. Safety is in the eye of the beholder. And so if a kiddo or a grown-up doesn't feel safe, that's going to cause issues. And so being aware of ways that we can seek that out, explore that, establish that, and provide those environments is really important. Is this my slide?
Carole, you got speaking notes here. You both can talk if you want to talk.
Um, should I go first, Anna?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So when children in your classroom, when they know what to expect, then and they can trust the adults around them, their brains are able to explore, to engage, to be curious, to learn. But if that safety element isn't there, and the child doesn't have a connected relationship with you, the adult, they're not able to learn and to because their brains are hijacked by that sense of being unsafe. So One of the things that is um, kind of easy to remember because it kind of rhymes is connection over compliance. So if a child is behaving in a way that is uh, unwanted by you, make sure to lead with connecting with the child first. Um, by expressing the emotions that you see the child expressing, or um, talking about what you think the child might be looking for or wanting, and that's why they're doing what it is that they're doing. Just however you could talk to the child, try to connect first before correcting their behavior and trying to get compliance from them. Um, because how you connect is really vital. It's really vital to your relationship with them and the relationship with the child, especially a child who has experienced trauma, is crucial. It's the most important thing. And another thing in this slide that I wanted to point out is the spaces that help children feel secure and welcomed. So the space that the child is in, your classroom, that space, it's so vital and crucial that all the children, but especially the kids who have experienced trauma, feel that they belong, that they have a sense of belonging in your classroom. And belonging means that every child is invited and every child is celebrated and supported, and they feel safe to show up as themselves. So in your classrooms, having this
You
environment of
already know right there. Okay.
excuse me?
I muted it. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Um, having that feeling that everyone belongs, because if somebody doesn't belong, then nobody belongs. It doesn't work. You need to have, it just needs to be across the board that everybody has a place and everyone belongs. And once children feel that they matter and they belong, then they can learn. And then I think Rose is going to talk about in the next slide about the predictable routines and clear expectations. But Anna, jump in. What are your
You did
thoughts?
such a great job. I think the only thing that I would add, in addition to what Carol said, is when we look at the safety and the space and that type of thing, a lot of that is really determined by that second box, the calm and regulated adult. Kiddos can be in most environments, and as long as their grown up is calm and things are going smooth, they're going to feel more safe. And so a lot of this really hinges on our own ability to be that calm present and to establish that environment for the kids in our class and those types of things.
I love it. Both of you. I love both of the responses. Yes, I wanted to share this and it was included in the resources. This is something we at ECC like to give out a lot, and it's just an example of a visual schedule and it's completely free. It was one of the website resources in the email. The importance of this, I mean, there's many, but for children with trauma, having that consistency can equal predictability, and they don't have to remain hypervigilant on not understanding what the expectation is, what is going to happen next. So when there is consistency within their classroom, that helps them feel safe. They don't have to worry and be on edge. So this is just another tool that you guys can do and easy to create a safe environment for them. So free, and if you guys want other examples, please feel free to reach out to us at ECC. We would be happy to help you build this, create it, set it up, whatever it is. So, okay, on to point number 2. I think
Oh, I'm
Carol.
sorry, that's me.
Yeah.
So again, the most important and most powerful support for children is their relationship with the adult, their caregivers, whether that's parents or teachers. Hopefully, it's both. Um, Relationships are a primary protective factor. And here are 3 quick little bulleted points for you to think about when you think about what does that mean for me to be a protective factor. Um, well, the first thing in the list is I've already, is to connect before you get compliance, before you correct the child. So building trust by connecting first and then guide behavior. And then a second thing that can really help build a relationship with the child is that phrase, name it to tame it, which means helping children identify what it is that they're feeling. Reflecting back to children the emotions that you see them expressing with their words, on their faces, in their bodies, giving children that kind of feedback that you can see how upset they are because they're clenching their fists or they're squinting their eyes shut or their cheeks are red or just whatever you see when you give children that feedback, it helps them understand their own emotional self. It helps them to understand that those big emotions that they feel, that other people can see them and other people experience those emotions as well. And it helps the child not feel so alone. And so when you are able to give a child that kind of feedback, it helps build that sense of connectedness, that sense, and it helps you build your relationship with them. And the third thing in my list, and it's one that Anna has talked about too in our previous meetings as we were getting ready for this, is to flex, don't fix. And so one of the things that I would encourage you as classroom teachers to really reflect on and reconsider is your rules and how rigid you might be in making sure that everybody's following those rules. When kids have experienced trauma, they need flexibility. They need to be heard, and I think they need to be accommodated. And so, um, we want the kids in our care to learn how to be flexible and how to accept their second choice, or when they don't get their first choice, how to go with it and be okay with it. And so if we want our kids to be flexible, we need to be flexible and role model for them what that's like.
Absolutely, Carol. I think your three merged with Anna's three. So, Anna, do you have anything to add on in this slide?
Um, just a couple points. I think the first thing when I look at, like establishing that safety in a classroom, a lot of kiddos that are coming from trauma backgrounds who are or have experienced things like that, they're kind of constantly on edge because they don't know, like, especially in volatile homes, is mom or dad or my grown up, whoever that is, going to be nice today? Are they going to be not nice today? Are they going to be intoxicated today? Whatever that looks like. And so being able to establish that consistency, because for them, then that shows like there isn't a roller coaster. There isn't that when's it going to give? When is this person going to snap? We always have that consistency. And so then the guard can come down, all those stress hormones and that nervous system can calm down for that kiddo. And then the second thing I wanted to add was I hear a lot of times people say like they're testing boundaries or they're pushing boundaries. And I don't think that's wrong. But I think it's maybe in a different way that we think. I think that a lot of times kiddos might do that to see if someone is truly safe and not necessarily to see how far they can push. And so that's just a really good thing to be aware of because sometimes kids will really, in their systems, which are not very logical, they want to know who they can really trust and who they're really safe with, and so they will push the bounds. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's in an attempt to be in trouble or to do anything like that. It's more to say, are you really a safe person? Are you really someone I can trust? Is this a place for that? Um, so yeah, those are my add-ons.
I love it. checking to see if the love you have is conditional. And we see that with the kiddos sometimes that Carole and I get called in to work with. So,
Absolutely.
oh, one too many. Okay. Um, if you've worked or taken a training from ECC, you know about the pyramid model. I'm gonna let Carole give her elevator spiel. And then while she's doing that, I am going to drop in the chat. It's a fairly newish document. I think it came out in 2024, 2025. It's called the Practice Guide. And Carole has dove into it deeply and created a whole module series on it. So if that's something, if you're an admin and you are interested in, please reach out to us because she's delivered it now to what, 3, 4 centers, and it's a phenomenal training. But I'm going to drop the practice guide in the chat for you to look at. Tons of great resources, and I'm going to let Carole give you the spiel about the pyramid model.
Well, for some of you, this is just review, but the pyramid model is a framework of practices. It is not a curriculum, but it's a framework of practices, and these practices are all designed to support and strengthen the social emotional skills in young children. And tier 1, which is those 2 blue tiers that are on the bottom, nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments. Um, all of the strategies and practices that are part of tier 1 promote um, the social emotional development of all kids, and it includes what we mentioned earlier: schedules, routines, classroom activities. There are strategies and practices that help teachers design and implement smooth transitions. It talks about the development of the relationship between the children and the teachers, and it also gives teachers some guidance of how to promote social skills and emotional competency or emotional literacy. Um, and then tier 2 in the green, that consists of specific skills and practices of how to teach friendship skills, problem solving, and again, emotion literacy. And then the top tier, intensive intervention, that teaches a very specific process of how to identify um, the antecedent or the triggers of challenging behavior. And then we look at strategies of what to teach the child so that they can get their needs and wants met without using challenging behavior. You know, that once we identify why they're using challenging behavior, then we look at what are some other ways that you can get those same needs met, but in a more pro-social way. So that's it in a nutshell, like from 30,000 miles up or whatever.
What is the percentage of challenging behaviors that decrease if tier 1 and tier 2 are implemented?
If tier 1 is implemented with fidelity, challenging behaviors decrease by around 80%. That's how effective this is. And it has been researched over and over and over again across many, many different environments for like 20 some years. If tier 2 is implemented again with fidelity, challenging behavior will decrease another another 15%. So if we look at challenging behavior decreasing 80% by implementing tier 1 and then another 15% by implementing tier 2, we're down to 5% of the general population that that's still experiencing challenging behavior or still using challenging behavior to get their needs met. Um, and so, like I said, coming in and identifying what those needs are and then helping children by doing an intensive intervention and working with the parents and the teacher and helping them identify some strategies that they could use to help that child. It's usually effective, not always, of course. I mean, human beings are incredibly complicated, but it's usually effective.
Very messy we are. So tier one, that's what you guys have control over, right? This is all of you attendees and teachers. It's the relationships and then the environment that you are creating. So even if you don't dive into doing pyramid model module series with Carole, there are still some things that you can change right now and decrease some of those challenging behaviors. So, okay, on to point number 3, and we're going to go back over to Anna.
Awesome. So understanding behavior through a trauma lens. This is really looking at, um, really it's more of a biological, physiological thing because children just don't communicate the same way as grown-ups. So it's looking at how, starting as babies, they communicate through crying, they communicate through, making noises, and then as their systems develop and as they learn different things, they figure out how to communicate in different ways. But ultimately, children really up until, you know, probably teen years, maybe even 20s. Um, they communicate through behaviors, they communicate through emotions, they communicate by the way that they feel, and it just comes out. And so that comes, we label those things as behaviors, but they're not necessarily a negative thing. They're a communication tool. And so if we're able to look at them as such, they can be really useful. This one's mine too. Um, we took notes beforehand because Carole and I both like to talk, so we tried to make sure that we were
It was equal.
back and forth. So really in this type of work, the primary component of it is not looking at a kiddo and saying, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this?" But it's really looking at what's going on. What are they struggling with? What is the root of this feeling, emotion, outburst, whatever it might be, and um, kind of approaching it. To me, it's really an empathy type thing. It's looking at it as they're having a hard time. And so, how can we approach it in that way rather than they're giving me a hard time? I'm sure some of you have heard that. It's the difference between they're having a hard time and they're giving me a hard time. But that's kind of, where this comes from is being able to see what are they experiencing, what are they feeling inside, because a lot of times they're probably ready to explode and they don't know how to deal with that. And so shifting that and then shifting our approach to address that.
I love the word empathy. I'm glad you inserted that. Okay,
I
now
think
we're
this
back.
kind of fits in. I recently heard of the acronym Q-tip, and because a lot of times when kids are acting up and um, stressing the teacher out, and the teacher is at her wit's end, which is completely understandable. It almost feels like the child is doing it to you. Like those behaviors are they're just out to ruin your day or or just make you crazy, make you nuts. Anyway, so this acronym Q-tip is quit taking it personally, is what it stands for. And so I think that if you do get into that spot where you get kind of whipped up and you're thinking, oh, golly, why is this happening today? I can't deal with it again today. Just try to remember to Q-tip it and see if that helps a little bit. Um, so building on that, these are some questions that you could ask yourself, like Anna was saying, to keep the child's perspective in mind. This is a child-focused orientation of like trying to build your own empathy and to try to connect with what is probably really going on beneath um, the surface behaviors, because that's what we want to do, is we want to get beneath that and look at what's happening. So that first question is, what happened to this child? And then to look at the behavior in a new, with a different perspective, and look at it like, has this behavior kept the child safe? Has, the way that this child is behaving, even though it is really unproductive and it's not working in the classroom, that behavior may have been um, helpful to the child in the past. So it's another thing to consider. And then the next question is, what does this child need relationally to feel safe, secure, and supported? So to try to start identifying um, what you might want to do or create or um, explore the things that you can do in your relationship with the child and also in the environment, in your classroom environment, to help that child feel supported and connected. And then to look at the behavior in a way that you're trying to see what could that behavior be communicating? What could the child be trying to express through that behavior? And then the last question of how are children perceiving and experiencing the environment? Um, just looking at your classroom and its effectiveness, and like perhaps that there are things that could change that would support not only the child that is exhibiting the behaviors, but just all the children in the classroom. And I don't think that we've said that. We've talked about it in our meetings, but the strategies and the approach that you use with children who have gone through trauma, those same exact strategies are good for all children. They're going to strengthen the social emotional skills of every child. And I also forgot to tell you when we were on the slide of the pyramid model that the strategies, all those strategies and practices that are in the tier 1 and tier 2, all of those support trauma. Those are all really solid strategies that will help children who have experienced trauma. It will help promote healing for them.
Something I would add to that is trauma is ultimately just really far on the spectrum of stress. I mean, stress is a spectrum, and trauma is just on the one side. And so all humans experience stress, and we experience that in different ways. So trauma-informed work is really just stress-informed work. And so it's really great for literally everyone, like Carole said, it's going to apply to all kiddos. But also, if you consider how implementing those things, I'm sure all of you can think of grown-ups, that aren't very emotionally regulated or emotionally intelligent. And the same goes for kiddos. And so giving those tools and providing them that toolbox is just beneficial straight across the board. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like this additional, this is the kiddos that have experienced trauma in this corner. It's really useful for all of them because it teaches regulation and it teaches different things that everybody needs. And that's something that we should all learn all the way through life.
Those are great points. Great points, Anna. Okay, so this next slide is looking at what educators should and can do. Some things here is the first thing is that you need to check in with yourself. It's really crucial that when a child becomes dysregulated, that you are aware of how that child's dysregulation impacts you and your ability to remain calm, to you know, steer the ship, and keep going, or does and to be aware of when that's not possible. That when a child if the child has been struggling for a few hours, like that you have hit the end of your rope, I want you to know that's fair. That's you, you need to own that and be okay with that and get some help, to get another teacher, get your administrator or whatever to come in and provide some support for you. Um, that's checking in with yourself and understanding where your own regulation is at is really crucial. Um, and then we kind of touched on this on the earlier slide, but look for the underlying needs that the child is expressing with that behavior rather than reacting just to the behavior. You know, try to reflect of like what else could be going on. Recognizing signs of stress or fear or that feel, the overwhelm when things are just too much. And then responding with curiosity and support rather than punishment. Um, and also just responding with compassion is, I think, where we really need to go. Let's see here.
I think it stays with you, Carole. You set us off on point 4.
Okay. So adult regulation and co-regulation and the self-regulation of the child. Um, regulation is emotion regulation is incredibly complex. It's very layered. It takes a lot of learning opportunities for kids to figure it out. And just like with every skill in the human experience, there are going to be some kids that learn how to regulate and do really well with it. And then there are other kids that it's going to come slow and they're going to need a lot of patience and a lot of opportunities to practice these new skills called emotional regulation. They're going to need to practice it over and over again for years, and but I think that when we stay on it and stay supportive and stay positive, they learn it. So, adult regulation, what do we mean when we're talking about adult regulation? It's the same as with kiddos, that if you recognize your emotions and you can name them, when you can name what it is that you're feeling, it can decrease the intensity of that emotion up to 40%. So being able, whether it's on an emoticon chart that we looked at the beginning of this class or um, looking at a list of words or whatever, but recognizing your emotions and being able to name them is where it starts. Rose, did you do that?
Do what?
Oh, it's gone now.
There was a little icon on the slide of an emotion chart.
Oh, no, not me.
Did anybody else see that? Or am I hallucinating?
I also saw it. I did see it.
Okay, good. Woo! Thanks for
Um,
that validation.
so I would add to what Carole said that regulation isn't just emotions. It's also the sensations in our body and how we feel in our body, how we hold ourselves, how we embody whatever that is that we're experiencing and that we're feeling. And so when we look at adult regulation, um, a big part of that is truly mindfulness, which is really hard, especially when you're distracted and you have kids screaming and you're trying to do your job and all of these things to stay present and stay mindful. But it's really a useful tool to start practicing mindfulness with your own body in spaces that you can, in spaces that are more calm and more quiet, when you go to the bathroom or when you're making supper or doing the dishes. How am I feeling? Where is this sit in my body? And I have a resource a little bit later on one of the slides that will hopefully help with that. But, um, what this is an example that I use, but this is like one of the primary things that I do in my work is I teach regulation. I help people learn their bodies and I help them learn how to regulate their nervous systems. And when I started personally doing the work, one of the first things that showed up for me is when I felt angry, I didn't actually like outright, I wasn't angry. I wasn't clenching my jaw. I wasn't screaming at people. My face wasn't red. None of the things that you would traditionally consider as anger, but I would clench my fists. And so I would be fully calm, having a conversation like everything is fine, but I was ready to fight. And I've never fought before. But that, like the fight or flight in your system. And so when we're aware of those things, and there's a lot of different things our body does in different nervous system states. Our pupils dilate different, our heart rate is different, our blood pressure is different. Those things we can't always tell, but we can tell if there is tightness. We can tell if there is a pause or a freeze or a tingling or a warmth. And so a lot of times those physical sensations are kind of that first indication to us that maybe I'm not calm. Maybe I am a little dysregulated. And so it is emotions, but it's also a lot of physical sensations and things that are going on outside of our brain.
Anna, it's so interesting that you bring that up because I think that my being in touch with the physical side of emotion regulation is by far the hardest thing for me. And I think I know I grew up in a family where, just suck it up.
Mhm.
If your throat hurt or you didn't feel good or just whatever, um, just being encouraged. And I'm not dissing my parents because a lot of it was the era that I grew up in, but it's just like, well, come on, we don't have time to deal with that. Just keep going. And so you just
Yeah.
learn to shut it down. You just learn to shove it aside and keep going. And um, anyway, as an adult and especially getting to understanding trauma and I guess understanding stress and wanting to live a more healthy lifestyle. I know that connecting to that physical side of my emotional well-being and my emotional reactions and feelings, um, it doesn't come easy for me at all.
And
So,
I mean, the reality is it doesn't really come easy for most people. But like I tell people all the time, I have like this list of things I tell people all the time, and this is one of them. That a lot of times when we're looking at regulation stuff, we have to get out of our head, which seems weird because my nervous system is in my head and all of those things. But the reality is our logical brain can talk us in and out of anything. We can decide we don't have time for this. I can't have this feeling. And so we talk ourselves out of it. But the reality is our bodies, which holds all of that sensation, is screaming at us and saying, you need to feel this, you need to move this stress through you, and you need to do it in this way. And so when we're not mindful of that, we miss those points and we miss that opportunity, and then it gets stuck in us and we get sick and we have stress issues and it becomes bigger. And so, yeah, being able to get out of the brain and get more into our body is a very useful tool.
hmm. Um, Before we move off this slide, I think we talked about three of the points, but I really find that second point of reframing your perspective to change how you feel about something and not to dismiss how you feel or not to suppress it, but reframing your perspective um, and and looking at it from a different point of view can help, I guess, it can help give you ideas of like how to handle it and what to do about it and like um help me out here.
I know I guess what popped into my mind as you were talking was empathy. But maybe thinking about like when I was a kid, how would I have wanted to be treated? or, my
Yeah.
inner child. How would I want to speak to that inner little girl? Um, so yeah, reframing it to kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes and
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I think the only point that I see, and it's in the notes, is you wanted to touch on the squad care that you learned about at the national conference, Carol. So I don't know if you want to mention that quick.
Well, I do want to mention what's on the notes in the
Okay.
slides because I think that it's helpful and positive is that when you are learning about your own self-regulation and you're learning about what works to help keep you regulated and what doesn't, that's just as important. Keep track of what works to help keep you regulated. And it can be little things, certain smells, certain things to touch, uh, a visual of a favorite place, a visual of a memory. Um, I have this, let's see, oh, I don't know if you can see it, guys, but it's kind of like a snow globe, except it's not snow, it's just water and they float on this wave in this little thing. And I got it after being at a conference, and it was to remind me that waves come up and we float along in the waves, and they might even be kind of uncomfortable, those waves, but eventually they calm down and, we regulate. It was just to kind of remind me of that. And, but anyway, so that is something that sometimes when I'm stressed out, I pick it up and I make the water go big so that there's lots of waves. And it's a little thing, but it helps me regulate a little bit. Anyway, keep track of those things and use those things. Use those things to help you regulate. And also use your team members, use your staff, use each other to help build build a community of connectedness and of empathy and safety in your workplace. They called it the squad care, and I really loved that phrase. To think of yourself as a squad and the things that you can do to care for each other. And I told Rose that I feel like we need to look at implementing that here at ECC. What can we do to create and sustain some squad care for each other here in our work at the agency? So just think about people who got your back and who make you feel safe, and how you do that for them as well. Your work culture is a big part of self-care. And also, it's so important to have fun and to laugh together and to learn together and to celebrate together, like all those joyous things. I think sometimes, especially when we talk about trauma, of course, there's just a lot of hard things and sad things, but the healing part of that is the joy and the fun and the connectedness. So just remember that, when you're working with your teammates. This is a little slide I got from one of the sessions that I went to at the conference, and we just thought it was just a nice little short list of tips of things that you can do to self-regulate. Um, Breathing exercises always helpful. Micro movements, using fidgets or doodling, playing with a pen, drinking water. And then rolling your neck or relaxing and contracting different parts of your body. And then macro movements, doing large motor movements, talking with somebody you trust, of course, and then writing down concepts, feelings, and thoughts that you want to reflect on. Reminding yourself of an encouraging mantra. I can do hard things. This is going to be okay. I think that's the one I use the most. This is going to be, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Anna, do you have one? And Rose, do you guys have a mantra?
I frequently talk to myself, so I say lots of things. Um, one thing that I would say to that, if you're able to, actually say it out loud. It has a different impact on your brain to say it out loud than it does in your head. And so if you're able to actually say, I can do hard things, or I'm going to get through this day, or this is
Mhm.
only temporary, or, whatever it is, but say it out loud. Like if it's with the kiddo, we can do this together. We can get through this. Because it hits our brain in a different way and it's just more impactful to say it out loud.
I think mine with my children specifically is I like to say mistakes happen. Like, I mean, it's just understanding that failure is a part of being human and not dwelling on that, but how do we continue? So mistakes happen. Life's messy, right? So I'm the real life Miss Frizzle. And I just wanted to say before we scrolled on, all of these that Carol pulled here would be great for kids too, right? So breathing
Yeah.
exercises, fidgeting, drawing. So these would all be applicable in your classroom with children too.
And I know I say this when I'm doing trainings, but I really, really want to stress it tonight that when you're in the classroom and you are dysregulated, really one of the most beautiful things you can do is process that out loud with to everybody in your classroom and just say, wow, I am feeling I'm feeling really upset right now, or I'm feeling really frustrated, or whatever. Name your emotion and then just say what it is that you think you need in order to process that emotion and regulate. I need to take a minute, or I think I need to go get some water, or I'm going to walk around the classroom a couple of times. Yeah, and to talk that through in front of your kids and then do it and then talk about how, yeah, that did make me feel better. Or if it doesn't make you feel better, to say that it didn't make me feel better. I wonder what else I could do. Anyway, that kind of role modeling is authentic and powerful.
And giving them the opportunity to come along. Like I'm
Oh,
going to take
yeah.
some breaths. If anyone wants to take breaths with me, this is what I'm going to do and count them out as you're doing it. Or I'm going to walk around the room. If anyone wants to follow me, you can get in line behind me. And so then it also you're mirroring that to them. So they're learning it as well in the practice part.
I love that. And that's a great segue into co-regulation with the child.
Um, so when co-regulating with with a child, the first thing you really need to do is to think about yourself, to ask yourself, what is this like for me when that child is dysregulated? Think about and talk about how to keep yourself grounded. Being aware how the child's dysregulated state affects you is really crucial. You cannot try to regulate another human being if you yourself are not regulated. And trust me, the child will feel that. If you're not regulated, no matter how calm you're trying to appear on the outside, if you're falling apart inside, the child will feel that. So your dysregulated nervous system cannot calm down another person's dysregulated nervous system. So um, I guess that sums up that. That's I
I'm gonna, I'm just thinking as you were talking, I'm gonna give a really very quick kind of summary on nervous system regulation because I don't know if we always know what that looks like and what that is. But basically, in our nervous systems, we all have this, it's called the window of capacity or the window of tolerance. And it's basically the area in which our nervous systems are at ease. It's when we can communicate, when we can connect, when we can do things, be inquisitive, all of that. And throughout all of our experiences, we ebb and flow in and out of that window of capacity. What dysregulation is basically when we have a hard time getting back into that area. And so whether it is in more of a heightened state or more of a depressed state, we ebb and flow into there. And so the dysregulation piece is really um, when we're outside of that and we're staying outside of that and we need to get back in. And that's where resilience comes from. Resilience is ultimately just our nervous system's ability to ebb and flow smoothly in and out of that. So when, looking at co-regulation, that's really when, when we're feeling ourselves coming out of that calm, connected, interactive place where we're now struggling to keep our cool and stay connected.
Yeah, great points. Great points.
So this one's a little tricky because we we often believe that, or we think that kids just they get to that point and they should know better, or we've done this before and you should be better at this. But the reality is young people don't fully learn to self-regulate. I mean, sometimes ever. I mean, I think we all know someone who has a really hard time with their sensations and their emotions and that sort of thing. Um, but if kiddos are taught and given tools somewhere by the teen years to early 20s, people are actually able to fully self-regulate. But up until that point, they are not able to help smooth that system, calm that system without the support of someone else. And so, putting a kiddo in timeout, which for safety reasons might be very effective for a moment, like I just need you to take a break, but it's not going to regulate their system because they're just dysregulated in a different space. And so, the reality is until children become close to adults and have a lot of tools and experience, they cannot regulate themselves. And so if we have the expectation that we can do that, we're going to be disappointed because they're not going to be able to. They're going to push those boundaries. Like I said before, they're not actually pushing. They're, where's my safety and how are you going to respond in this situation? And so being aware that while we can teach a kiddo to do something, ultimately the reason it's regulating them is because we're teaching them in that moment. And so, my 5-year-old, we smell flowers and blow out candles and smell flowers and blow out candles and smell flowers and blow out candles. Um, but I would have no expectation at any point for him to be able to do that on his own because he's 5. And the only reason he can do it now is because I'm doing it with him and I'm there and I'm a peaceful presence. And so, I think this slide is more just take that expectation off the table. Don't expect young people, some adults, to be able to do that on their own.
Carole, do you have anything to add?
No, well said. Well said.
I think this one's huh?
So this one kind of relates pretty well to that one. When we are aiding in co-regulation and kiddos learn their their calming, their tools, their um, coping mechanisms, all of those things from their grown-ups. Whether it's tools that they have to use to keep themselves safe from their grown-ups or things that their grown-ups give them that are more positive coping strategies. Um, but for us, the best thing that we can do, like we've talked about on past slides, is be aware of our own regulation, be aware of our own triggers, be aware of how those things come up, and also how they come out to the kids. And then modeling those responses, like Carole mentioned, I'm having a hard time right now. I need to take a break. And that's totally okay. Helping children name and understand what those things look like, and then offering comfort, reassurance, those type of things. Um, I'm going to tell a story here. I was going to tell it maybe on a different slide, but it feels right here. This last weekend, and this is just an example, and it's my personal example because I don't like to use examples from other people because they're not my story. Um, I took my 5-year-old to the kids fair in Rapid. And for any of you that know the kids fair in Rapid, it is fantastic, but it is sensory overload in every direction. It is excitement and noise and running around and overload. And so after my 5-year-old and I had been there for an hour and a half ish, and I'd, don't run into people, watch what you're doing, wait for your mom, don't get out of line, about 8,000 times. Um, we're both kind of on that verge, like I could tell he was a little excited and I was feeling a little impatient. And he started doing something with something on a booth that he probably shouldn't have been. And that's where my patience ended. And I came down to his face and I said, "We're done. I've asked you, we're done." And then I was like, "Oh, I'm just being really impatient." Like I caught myself and I was like, "I'm feeling frustrated. Let's go for a walk." And so even though we were still in kids fair and it was still crazy, we didn't have like a place to go or a toy to see or a jumpy castle to jump in. And so we just did a lap and we breathed. And I was like, "What do you think about that? Did you notice that color?" And we just calmly kind of brought ourselves back down. And then when it was all done, I'm really sorry I was impatient with you. And he's like, "I wasn't listening." And I'm like, "I am aware." And then we were able to move on with the day. And, it was still crazy and it was still sensory overload, but being able to catch it, identify it, model it. Because I very well could have just been like, "We are done. Get out of here." And it would have ruined the whole day. But, noticing those things in ourselves, and, I'm very aware of when my system comes up. And so, I caught myself probably a little later than I should have, but I am human. Um, and so that's a lot of what we can do in, classroom settings is know when we're starting to get hot and catch ourselves and then go through these steps to, you know, not only support ourselves but also model to the kiddos.
I love that. And that touches on a resource that I sent in the email, which is a video from Dr. Becky on rupture and repair. So Anna was able to catch herself before a rupture. However, as she said, we're human, and those moments are going to happen where we're not always able to. And the important thing to remember in that is the repair. So coming back to it, and like she even said, like having that conversation afterwards and talking about it when you're both regulated, like that is super important to do that with children, and it's how we all collectively heal, right? We're moving forward to acknowledging that ruptures happen and we're repairing that relationship. So that check that out. That's in the email under resources. Okay, here's a great resource from Anna.
So this is just kind of it's an easy visual for in your environments as to, I mean, one, it works for you too, but as to what to look for in your kids. And after this, we'll talk about some more resources, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. But when we or young people are regulated, it feels ease. It feels natural. There's not tension, there's not tightness. But then as we go up into these different sections, in the yellow zone, you just, kind of like my fists go when I'm angry. I'm not punching, but I'm tense. And so you can notice that in kiddos a lot of times where maybe their eyes glass over, maybe they start getting more fidgety, or they get tense, or their feet are bouncing around. My kiddo recently had an injury and we've been going to physical therapy. And one of the things I've noticed with him as he gets agitated, activated, is that he'll start doing things to his physical therapist's face. Like he'll throw Play-Doh at her, or he'll, try to poke her in the cheek. And then I know, like, "Do you need a break?" And he's like, "I do need a break." And then we take a break. And so kind of noticing what each kiddo does, that shows that they're having a hard time and that things are getting tense and tight for them. And then in the red zone, In the yellow zone, we have an opportunity to, like we're just going to calm things down. In the red zone, I think we probably need to be a little bit more proactive because then that's where the behaviors come in and things like that. And we'll get into more of those tools, but just an easy visual.
Mhm.
I want to draw attention really quick to that bottom in the red. Regulate first and then teach and process later. It is very often that Carol and I see the opposite happen when we see challenging behaviors when we get called in, is that we, as the adult and the teacher, we want to process with that child right then when the behavior is happening. Why did you do that? Talk to me about it. And it's just making it worse. You have to, as Anna says, regulate first. Both of you have to regulate first.
Well, the reality is the part of the brain that does our executive functioning and is our logical part of the brain, when we're to that point of dysregulation, it is literally shut off. It is closed for
Yep.
business. It is not hearing you. And so you're talking to this very primitive part of a brain that has no idea, they don't know what you're saying. You're just making yourself upset. And so, yeah, just regulate, don't talk. You don't have to say anything besides, it's okay, I'm here, you're safe, let's breathe. Just very calm type things because there is nothing else going into them. It's just danger, danger, danger. This is just a resource. When we were talking about body sensations, this is what I teach people. How do we feel? And a lot of like most of us never learned to identify emotions, and we definitely never learned what our body feels like. And so, a lot of times people are, our defaults are I'm sad and I'm mad. And that's it. That's what we know. But we don't even know what that feels like. We're just sad or we're mad. So this is just a resource, and this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many body sensations, but just something you could look at for yourself as you're kind of tuning into your own regulation. What do I feel? Do I feel a warmth? Do I feel a buzzing? Do I feel a tightness? And so it can just give you some guidance as you're working on becoming more mindful around your own system.
I love it. And that was included in the email as well. Okay, we are going to have to cruise through these last 2 points. So we are point number 5. Sticks with you, Anna.
Okay. So why don't we just go to the next one and I'll just talk
Perfect.
on the next
Sounds
one.
good.
It'll all bunch in together.
Okay.
So supportive environments go back to, safety and how, we provide those things for the kiddos that we're working with. And there's a lot of things we can do. And I, try to be really cognizant because we know that all of you are busy and you are doing a gazillion things, and you do not have time to do a gazillion more things to try to make an environment, look in a certain way or whatever it may be. But these are just some things that you could put into place to maybe offer some ease, to try new routines, that sort of thing. But and this one's maybe for a little bit older kiddos, but I can imagine by first or second grade, a lot of kids could do this, but classroom agreements. And that's where the children agree on what our rules are. Like, our rules aren't just given to us, like, this is our space. And how do we come to an agreement that says, this is how we all behave, this is our buy-in, this is what we're all doing to be a part of this. Having a calm down or a cozy corner. And that would be a space where you would have different sensory things, opportunities for kids to either do calm things or more active things. Because with the nervous system, sometimes kids are in more of a freeze state and sometimes they might be in more of a fight or flight. And so depending on where they're at in their nervous system, they're going to need different approaches. And so it could be weighted blankets, it could be fidget toys, it could be, sensory things or coloring. I don't know in your spaces your availability to do this, but scents, like if you had essential oils or something like that, that you could diffuse. The olfactory system is actually the only system in our body that encodes directly into the brain. And so we learn faster through our smell. And so if we have a smell that we consistently offer as safety, kids can learn that that's a safe piece. And so you can put that in a cozy corner. And then when they go in that cozy corner, it's literally going to signal to their brain that I'm more safe here. And it's a training thing, but it works fantastically well. Movement breaks. So, depending on your space and how much they have to sit, like let's all get up and stretch, or let's do some yoga, or everybody run in place. Um, TheraBand on chair legs, and that's just kind of an elastic band that kids can play with their feet, and so they don't have to be rigidly still. But I think that one connects into just flexibility. Like, if a kid is moving, is that a problem? Like, do we have to have an issue with that, or is that their way to deal with their stress energy and move things through? Um, Sensory pathways, that is, maybe doing like a maze type thing on the floor where, here you crawl, here you do something, here you might have something fuzzy, and you go through that. Um, Moving things that are heavy, making sure we announce our transitions, have our consistent schedules, give notice. 5 more minutes and we're going to do this. 4 more minutes and we're going to do this because it prepares for those transitions. Flexible seating. Do we have to be at a desk? Do we have to stay in our desk? Is it that disruptive? If we're not, can we have a beanbag chair? What do all those things look like? Schedules that are visual, pictures or words, depending on the kids. I already talked about the transition one. Um, Acknowledging positive behavior. Whether it's, I know when I was a kid, we could earn popcorn parties and pizza parties and that sort of thing, but, something where we're focusing more on the good than the things that are hard. Code words and signals. So if you do have a kiddo that maybe does have a trauma history or have some behaviors that come up, they're going to know a lot of times that something's not right. And if they can learn that, code word cotton ball or, whatever, that they can then go to the cozy corner or they can then go stand at the back of the room, whatever that might be. And then classroom rituals. And this can be a lot of things. I'm sure you've seen the videos where like the teacher stands outside of the room in the morning and the kids can pick a high five or a hug or a fist bump or, things like that that show that we're all a part of this. We're all together in this. This is our group. We're here. Helps with establishing that safety.
Awesome. What a great list. Thank you, Anna. Okay, now we're going to bounce over to Carole.
Let's skip this side because we're
Okay.
kind of getting out of time, and there's other stuff that I'd rather talk about. And this, I'd rather talk about this. So, regulation, the definition of being regulated means that you have enough energy and enough self-control and enough ability to think, enough cognition to do whatever it is that is the task at hand. And so being regulated for being outside at recess is a way different type of regulation than being regulated when it's circle time. And so this idea of regulation stations, we all know about calming spaces and, the calm down corner or whatever it is that you call it in your classroom. But using the flip side of that and looking at contained energy zones was a concept that I learned about while I was at the conference last week. And on this is kind of a commercial. On April 22nd, I'm teaching a class, and I am going to be integrating the stuff from that session that I went to into the class on the 22nd. So, and it's a face-to-face class, and we're going to talk about looking at like an expanded definition of what regulation is and how we can meet the needs of the children in our care with helping them understand different types of regulation for different circumstances and how to manage that. Okay, yep. And then on this slide, um, I just wanted to point out that Rose got this group of books put together, and that stories can help children who have had these experiences. These kinds of stories can help them realize that they're not alone, that these kinds of experiences happen, and that it can help them feel heard and validated. And it's not the same as having a conversation with someone, but it is, um, it's just, like I said, helping them understand that these things happen and that they're not alone. Anna, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think any opportunity that we can help kiddos feel seen and heard is really important. And that goes along with the regulation stuff. Like, I see you're having a hard time. I see this is, tough for you, or I see the tears in your eyes. And so, resources like this, and they don't fit every kid. Nothing does. But it's just an opportunity to say, things like this happen and they happen to other people, and you're not alone, and we see you.
I love
Yep.
that. These lists are in that email, and I want to point out something because we're not going to dive into each one. But if you are curious, is this book right for my classroom? Go watch it on YouTube. That's what I spent a little bit of time doing research, and there are some that here are more for elementary, but then there are some that could go for infant and toddlers, like the Rabbit Listen. So I would just recommend once you look at that list to maybe go look at it on YouTube for a read aloud and see if it will work with your classroom and your kiddos. Okay, we are on our last point and we are gonna rush through with our last 8 minutes. So Carole,
Hey, I'm not very good at speed talking, though, I have to admit. But trauma informed care focuses on children's strengths and their resilience and not just their challenges. So we really want to keep that in mind. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here are some really important things to remember, that this approach of looking at their strengths builds their competence and their confidence, and it helps them have a sense of agency. And agency is when you believe that you can accomplish what you set out to do. And we want these little guys to feel like that they have a sense of agency. And so these 3 points on the slide will help build that. So recognizing the child's efforts and progress, you know, and that is you giving them feedback. When you give them feedback, they know that you're paying attention, that you're tracking things, and that helps them believe that they are important to you, and that they make a difference. Offering meaningful choices and opportunities for independence, as we teach our those little guys life skills and um, problem solving, friendship skills, all that thing. They just that is very self-empowering, and it builds them up. And then creating successes and moments of growth. If you've had a training from me, there's probably a really good chance that I talked about how to give and the importance of giving positive descriptive feedback, PDF. It's so crucial. Positive descriptive feedback. And if you don't know what that is, please reach out, because we've got some really great information about how to structure positive descriptive feedback. And that is one of the most effective ways to change behavior, is to give children positive descriptive feedback on what they're doing correctly, what they're doing right.
And to use it in even after the moments of dysregulation and behaviors and all of that, like, that was really hard and you did such a great job breathing with me. Or that
Yeah,
was, a really tough time, but you did this so well. Because that's going to reinforce that those tools are important and they're useful and they can use them.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So, providing positive experiences in these 5 areas down below help strengthen resilience. So, if you give a child some positive experiences with strengthening their self-esteem. Um, and by doing that is by recognizing them, by giving them positive descriptive feedback of, like what Anna just said, about doing something that was hard, or tracking over time. You can see that they have accomplished something academically, and you give them feedback. I mean, just all those opportunities help strengthen their self-esteem. And then helping children strengthen their social skills is another thing that will definitely strengthen their resilience. Um, Asking a friend to play, joining play, giving a play idea, accommodating another friend's play idea, and not demanding that it's your way or the highway. All those skills, sharing, passing toys back and forth, asking for what you need and want from, to a friend. All of those social skills will help build resilience. And then academic abilities, finding an area of interest that the child has and helping the child grow that interest will help build their self-efficacy, that belief that they can do what they set out to do. And in the same vein as academic ability would be artistic and athletic abilities. Looking, watching the child and looking at what they're interested in and what they're drawn to, and then helping the child strengthen those abilities and maybe expand and deepen those abilities, will be very empowering, self-empowering for the child. And those are the things that help them believe in themselves and help them um, have that, that healing of the trauma, and then is one part of it. And then the flip side of that is, um, moving on and celebrating their skills and their gifts and their contributions.
So this is just a visual that kind of explains where people are on the spectrum in terms of their knowledge around trauma. And so the more we get into the red, the more harm we can cause because we just ignore it. We don't care. And then as we move up, up to 5, trauma informed is where ideally we want most people to be. That's where we acknowledge it, we can identify it, we can do things around it, we have it in policy and procedure, all of those things. But then we can go even higher and actually put it into our systems and put it into our communities and make sure that we're really being responsive and healing centered and knowing that pretty much everyone on the planet is touched by trauma, and that the more we look at how all of that impacts everyone, the better that our systems are. And this is one of the things that I do in my work. I teach people to be trauma informed, and then we go up to 6 and we go up to 7 because that's how we really make a change.
I love that. You guys got this resource in the email. Um, there are a ton of resources, and here's how I'm going to approach right now. I am going to speed talk through these slides of resources. We're going to skip over the pre-submitted questions, and I'm going to post the evaluation QR code and link in the chat. And while you guys are working on that, we'll go back to the pre-submitted questions, and then if we have time, I will play the trailer at the end. So, Anna, if you want to insert anything into these, I'm going to speed talk through them though, okay? So this first one is all about like tangible resources that you guys can have. So some really great sites where you can go shopping for trauma-informed stuff for your classroom environment, your in-home daycare, and then the early childhood enrichment system. We have a resource hub with all sorts of lesson plans, policies, forms, anything you could want. So those are like your tangible resources right there. And again, all of these were listed in that email. These are 3 great furthering education and deepening your understanding of trauma informed, as Anna just said, moving past the 5 into 6 and 7. Do you have anything else to add on this one, Anna?
No, well, maybe. Self-compassion is really important for grown-ups and for kids. And so Dr. Neff does a lot of self-compassion for adults. Jamie Lynn Tatera has a lot for children and caregivers. And so you can kind of mush them together and do your own work. And then that, spills over into the work that you do with the children.
Here are our media resources that Anna recommends. So you're all familiar with Inside Out. Sesame Street, not only the show, but they have a lot of free great resources and workshops. So it's titled Sesame Workshop though, so go there to that link. Mr. Rogers, the TV show, and also he has an institute where you can go in and take trainings and professional development. So another great resource. And then Daniel Tiger. We just love his empathetic and compassionate soul. So some great media there. These are some movies that Anna recommends. So all the links here, and I did also include in the email how you can stream them, all free as well. Anna did say earlier to Carole that the Wisdom of Trauma, it does ask you to make a donation. However, if you don't feel you're in a place to financially make it, if you enter in zero, you are able to watch that. So that website there was included in the email. These are apps that you can download, whether it be on your phone, if you use a tablet in your classroom. So these are some great ones that Anna recommends as well. Carole and I are big proponents of the zones of regulation. We have great kits and further resources. If this is something that strikes a chord with you, we would be happy to deliver them. It was just too big of a file to attach to your email.
Can I just
And
say one quick thing?
yes.
That How We Feel app, if you want to expand your own emotional literacy, your own ability to understand what it is that you're feeling, download that app.
Mhm.
I just love it.
That's exact. I was going to say it's fully free.
Yeah.
I try not to ever give out a resource that costs money because we don't have any. But How We Feel is such a great way to start being mindful of yourself and start connecting to you. And you can set reminders, so it'll ask you throughout the day, how are you feeling? And there's images, and you can point on your body, and it's really great. So good app.
Yeah.
If you are a reader, here is a list of books that Anna recommends. And earlier, Carole asked, she's like, what's your top? And she said, The Body Keeps the Score. So if you're looking for your next read, that's the one you want to look at. And again, this list is in that email.
I will preface that it is like a textbook, though, so don't expect a fun historical fiction or anything like that. It's like a textbook. So
This last one is all of the websites that we mentioned tonight, resources we pulled from, and that is featured in that email as well. Professional growth, if you want to continue, I have on here Black Hill State's logo because we have an articulation agreement with them. They offer an online associate's degree in early childhood. The CDA, you can get that through us at ECC if you don't already have it, and it is the most nationally recognized early childhood credential. And then if you're looking at a professional network to join, I am the local chapter rep for the SADACI network, and we just had our annual conference here in Rapid. So it's always a great time to see people and talk and not feel like we live on an island, right? Because sometimes it can feel that way. All right, this is where we're going to skip over really quick. And I am going to share this in the chat. So there's the QR code that you guys can sign. However, the link right there is in the chat. So take that evaluation. That's how we issue those training certs. I'm going to navigate back over to, I'm not going to close it up other than thank you guys for coming tonight. This work is, it is so deep and meaningful and nuanced. And you guys just kind of got the tip of the iceberg tonight on a lot of tips and resources. So if you want to talk more, both Anna and Carole are a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure they would be happy to field some email questions if you guys want to dive into it deeper. And then here, trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. So another powerful quote. I'm not going to take you to our additional trainings. Carole already gave the self-advertisement of hers coming up, so sign up for that if you haven't already. And get to the pre-submitted questions. Okay, we'll talk about these while you guys are taking those evaluations. So, the first one for the experts, how can I support a child who has experienced trauma without knowing their full background or story?
Can I?
Anna, do you want to
Yep,
answer
I'll take
that?
it.
Yeah.
Um, so this is a terrible way to word this, but the cool thing about trauma is you don't need to know what the trauma is. There's nothing cool about trauma, but this is kind of a point. Because trauma does live in our bodies, it's all physical responses, it's all physiological, it's sensations, it's emotions. So we don't have to know what's going on or what has happened. We more so need to tune into what are they experiencing now, what's happening in their bodies now. In my coaching practice, that's one of the things I tell my clients right off the bat. You don't have to tell me a single thing about what happened to you in your life. I don't need to know because we are going to focus in on how you're feeling, how that's manifesting itself in life. And that's the same thing with kiddos is we really just need to know that they're having a hard time and what that looks like, and then giving them the space, the tools, the co-regulation to help work through that. Um, so it's sure there's some benefits to knowing where they come from and why it happens, and that might just be on an empathy level. But generally it's completely unnecessary because it is all in physical manifestations.
Hmm.
Carol, do you have anything to add to that?
No, she does such a great job with that question. So I think we can just leave it there.
Okay. What are practical strategies I can use in the moment when a child is dysregulated or exhibiting challenging behavior?
It's really interesting because in the moment when a child is dysregulated, and it kind of depends on how dysregulated the child is, but if the child is tantruming, there's nothing to do. Just to let it pass. Make sure the child stays safe physically, doesn't hurt himself or herself or any of the other children um, or people in the room. Um, but there are a bunch of wonderful strategies that you can use in teaching the child how to handle those big feelings. But all that learning needs to happen when things are calm, when the child is like in the green zone. And that's when you do your intentional teaching. And it's in that everyday life with the child when you're at recess or having snack or doing a craft in small groups at tables. Those are where you can then start implementing those in the moment learning opportunities. You know, if you know that a child becomes dysregulated when he has to share items, then during a craft, you set it up intentionally so that that child will need to share scissors or glue or whatever. And then you support the child and you start talking, giving the child prompts and cues of the strategies that you taught earlier, and you just help drive those lessons home, and you do it over and over again, and so that the child realizes that there are things to do besides blowing up,
Mhm.
that there are things to do to be able to handle emotions more effectively, and then just teaching emotional literacy, teaching about feelings and that they're big and scary and overwhelming sometimes, but just like clouds in the sky, they pass by. So if we hang in there, those big feelings will pass. I mean, there's just a bazillion lessons and so many strategies and practices that you can implement. And that pyramid model practice guide that Rose sent the link to, that has a massive amount of information in it, and there's tons of links that will take you directly to resources. There's just all kinds of things. I mean, do we could talk for a whole week about that.
We
But
could just talk for a whole week anyway, but
I just want you to know that in the moment when a child is really dysregulated, just be compassionate and empathetic and just get them through it.
Mhm. Yeah, what I would add to that
Yes.
is most emotions only last about 90 seconds. And so, a lot of times things get bigger because we feed them. And if we can, kind of cut off the feed, that can be really helpful. But I had seen, this was a couple of years ago, I had watched a video, and it was a dad with his toddler, and the toddler was having a complete breakdown, complete meltdown, tantrum on the floor. And dad just was calm presence. He didn't say anything besides, I'm here. His only job was to make sure the kid was safe. Like, I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to make sure you don't hit the wall. And the kid just kind of tantrumed themselves out. And then when it was done, it was hugging and are you okay? And that was really big. And, it was just comfort. And I know in classroom settings, it's very different than what you can do as a parent. But, a lot of times that's really what a kiddo needs is they just need peace and they need to feel that thing. And sometimes it's big and sometimes it's not pretty. But it's there and it's serving a purpose, and it might be fight or flight, and it might just be they're confused or they're upset. But to the best that we can, just to give them that space to burn their fuse out. I know that's a terrible, but it is energy, it's stress energy, and our bodies want to get stress energy out of us. And so that's what they're doing, is they're just trying to get that stress energy out.
I loved everything you guys have to say, as always. I think we're going to go over to your closing remarks, and whoever wants to hang out and watch the trailer for the oh my gosh, my brain is checked out. Whoever wants to stay and watch it afterwards can go ahead. Anna, do you have any closing remarks?
Um, Thank you all for being here, for being an attentive audience. There is not a lot of people that love trauma. Trauma is my passion. And not because I, for any weird reason, it's something that is important and needs to be done, and it touches all of us, and it's so important. And if I can ever be a resource to you or your organization, I do trainings and workshops and trauma informed stuff, and I do policy and procedure audits. I mean, I go really deep to make sure that, you know, everyone is supported and the environment is the best that it can be. So if that's ever anything of interest, hopestorm.org, send me an email. I'm happy to connect, to answer questions, because being trauma informed is so very, very important.
Thank you,
Uh,
Anna.
yeah.
Carole?
Um, I guess I would just like to remind you all that Rose and I are available to offer support to programs, teachers, administrators, um, whenever you need it. Just give us a call or send us an email, and we will. Sometimes we get busy and we can't. We have a list of people that, like a waiting list sort of thing, but we do the best we can to get out and be in your classrooms, observe what's going on, and to provide strategies and supports for you and the children in your care. So, like I said, just a reminder that our services are available. I like to think of Rose and I as the dream team. Yes.
Anna,
So,
you can be
and
our Northern Hills sub, okay?
Fantastic. I'm in.
yeah,
So yeah, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Carole and Anna. I could have listened to you guys talk for hours, so we'll have to do it again. You guys are free to go, as some of you have already logged off. As soon as you take that evaluation, I'm going to go over to the trailer and allow that to play for anyone that wants to watch it. But thank you all for attending, and I hope I see you guys next month.
Anna, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both.
Yeah, just loved it.
Okay.
In
Ladies,
the
I'm
U.S.,
very
the rigid
computer
society used
illiterate,
to
and I didn't
fully
get
half of
the
its citizens have a chronic
deal
disorders such
to
as high blood pressure or
do
diabetes.
the evaluation for you.
Let me,
How can I get there?
I just put it again in the chat. Do you see that, Marilyn?
Oh, I'll see. Okay, so this is the only thing we have then, this 12 question thing?
Yep. Yep. There's no pre or post. It's just the evaluation.
Class
Yep.
class title, what did you call it?
Trauma informed care will work.
Trauma informed care?
Yep.
Oh,
Anxiety amongst young people is growing rapidly. Asthma and autoimmune diseases are on the rise, as are addictions.
Depression is rising. Youth suicide is rising.
All is not well.
I started heroin at 26. That's what really destroyed me. It just takes the pain away.
It's easy to want to escape reality completely instead of coping with it.
And so the question is, can we be human beings in the midst of civilization? Because what we call civilization demands the denial of human needs.
Please welcome Dr. Gabor Mate.
Every human being has a true, genuine, authentic self. And the trauma is that disconnection from it, and the healing is the reconnection with it. Why do we get disconnected? Because it's too painful to be ourselves.
So you sort of a bit like in The Matrix when Neo sees everything's made out of numbers. You look at people and you see all their trauma and damage.
That's what I see. So trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. What do you want to tell me? What comes up right now?
Shame.
Thank you.
My father, he would spank us and take a belt to us.
Who did you speak to about your pain?
Nobody.
Yeah, that's the trauma. In other words, by the time you're 5 years old, you're completely alone. People are much more lonely and isolated than they used to be. Literally, it causes inflammation in the body and suppresses the immune system. You've been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Correct.
In my view, people that develop cancer have a hard time expressing healthy anger.
Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, there were two traumatized people fighting to govern a traumatized world.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And these are the people that our society rewards with power. Our schools are full of kids with learning difficulties, mental health issues that are trauma-based, but the average teacher never gets a single lecture on trauma. We need trauma-informed medical care, trauma-informed education. If we had a trauma-informed society, we'd have a society that looks much more compassionate.
You did. You made a difference in my life.
Thank you for being in touch.
I don't feel like I'm a bad person anymore. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I just want people to see the truth. Solutions arise out of people when they confront themselves with the truth, when they're not afraid of the truth.
I think the biggest thing that this whole healing journey has taught me is how to be human.
Like that, and I was like, I know I'm supposed to say something. You know, because he was a terrible friend, and I wanted to be held back.
In the U.S.
I'm going to sign off, guys.
Sounds
Night.
good. Have a good night, Carole.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.